David Thompson sat in his corner office on the 40th floor, looking out at the city skyline he had worked so hard to be part of. At 42 years old, he had built Thompson Real Estate Group from nothing into one of the most respected commercial property firms in the entire state. What started as a small residential agency 15 years ago was now a multi-million-dollar company with 8 locations and over 200 employees. The mahogany desk in front of him was covered with reports showing impressive numbers. Revenue was up 18% from last year. They had closed some of the biggest commercial deals in the city's history. Major corporations were calling them first when they needed office space or retail locations. By every measure that mattered to investors and board members, his company was a massive success. But David couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. It started 3 months ago with a phone call that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. A small business owner named Rodriguez had called the corporate office directly, bypassing the usual channels. He spoke carefully, like someone who had been burned before and didn't want to make trouble. Rodriguez owned a growing accounting firm and had been looking for office space in the downtown business district. He had visited their flagship branch office twice, and both times he felt like the agents were not taking him seriously. "I don't want to cause problems," Rodriguez had said during that phone call. "Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I've been in business for 8 years, my credit is excellent, and I have the money ready." Still, they kept showing me spaces in areas I never asked about. When I mentioned the downtown district, they said those properties weren't really suitable for my type of business. I asked what they meant by that, and they couldn't give me a straight answer. David had assured Rodriguez that he would look into it personally. He called the branch manager right away asking about the situation. The manager, a man named Harrison who had been with the company for 5 years, claimed it was all a misunderstanding. He said the downtown properties Rodriguez wanted were either too expensive for his stated budget or had specific requirements that wouldn't work for an accounting firm. Everything sounded reasonable when Harrison explained it. David tried to put the incident out of his mind, but then more calls started coming in. Not many, but enough to create a pattern that made him uncomfortable. A woman who owned a small marketing agency had a similar experience. So did a young man starting a tech consulting business. They were all professional people with good credit and legitimate businesses, but they all felt like they weren't being treated with the same respect as other clients. The thing that bothered David most was that all these complainants were people of color, and they were all being steered away from the prime commercial locations downtown. When David looked at the numbers, he noticed something troubling. Over the past year, client retention among minority business owners had dropped by 30% at the downtown branch. At his other locations, retention rates were steady or improving across all demographics. David decided to do some quiet investigating. He asked his assistant to pull files on recent commercial leases at the downtown branch. What he found made his stomach turn. The prime office spaces in the best buildings were going almost exclusively to established white-owned businesses or large corporations. Smaller businesses owned by minorities were consistently placed in older buildings on the outskirts of the downtown area, even when they had expressed interest in and could afford better locations. When David dug deeper, he found that his top-performing agent at the downtown branch, a woman named Patterson, had an interesting track record. Her sales numbers were excellent, and she consistently brought in high-value deals. But when David looked at her client list, he saw that almost all of her successful deals were with white business owners or corporate clients. The few minority clients she worked with either didn't close deals or ended up in less desirable properties. David called Patterson into his office for a meeting. She was professional and confident, explaining that she simply focused on matching clients with properties that made sense for their businesses. When David pressed her about the pattern he had noticed, she became defensive. She insisted that she treated all clients equally and suggested that some people were just more realistic about what they could afford than others. "I've been doing this for 12 years, Patterson had said, sitting across from his desk with perfect posture and an unwavering smile. "I know how to read people and what they really need. Some clients come in with big dreams but no understanding of the market. My job is to help them find something that actually works for their situation." David left that meeting feeling more unsettled than before. Patterson's words sounded reasonable, but something about her tone bothered him. There was a subtle arrogance in the way she spoke about certain clients, as if she knew better than they did about what they deserved. Over the next few weeks, David tried different approaches to address the problem. He sent company-wide memos about equal treatment and fair housing laws. He brought in trainers to conduct diversity and inclusion workshops. He even had HR create new policies about client documentation and follow-up procedures. Everything looked good on paper, and he received positive feedback from his managers about how well the training was received. But the complaints kept coming. A small restaurant owner called to say he had been discouraged from looking at a prime, street-level space that would have been perfect for his business. When he asked to see it anyway, he was told it had already been leased, but he later found out it was still available. A woman starting a law practice said she felt rushed through appointments and was only shown offices in a building that had maintenance issues and poor parking. David realized that formal approaches weren't working. His managers were telling him what he wanted to hear. His agents were nodding along with the training sessions, and the policies looked great on paper. But real clients were still having bad experiences, and his company's reputation in the minority business community was getting damaged. The breaking point came when David received a call from Robert Kim, a successful entrepreneur who owned 3 businesses already and was looking to expand. Kim had heard great things about Thompson Real Estate Group and came to the downtown branch with high expectations. He was looking for a significant office space that would house 50 employees, with a budget that put him in the top 10% of their commercial clients. Kim's experience was so bad that he not only took his business elsewhere, but also wrote a detailed review online warning other business owners to be careful. He described being kept waiting for over an hour, being shown spaces that were completely wrong for his needs, and feeling like the agent was more interested in getting rid of him than making a sale. The review was professional, but devastating, and it was getting attention from other business owners in the city. David knew he had to do something drastic. All his traditional management approaches had failed. His branch managers were either part of the problem or unable to see it. His agents were smart enough to say the right things in meetings, but apparently weren't changing their behavior with clients. The company he had worked so hard to build was developing a reputation for discrimination, and that could destroy everything he had accomplished. That's when David started considering an idea that seemed crazy, but might be the only way to get real answers. If he wanted to know what was really happening in his own company, he would have to see it for himself. Not as the CEO making a surprise visit, but as a regular client who would experience exactly what his complainants had been describing. David. Thompson was about to become someone else entirely. David spent the weekend thinking about his crazy idea. Going undercover in his own company sounded like something from a movie, not real life. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. He had tried everything else, and nothing was working. If he really wanted to know what his clients were experiencing, he needed to become one of them. The first challenge was figuring out how to make this plan work. David was well known in the local business community. His picture had been in the newspaper several times, and he had spoken at industry conferences. The agents at his downtown branch had all met him at company meetings, even if they didn't work with him directly every day. He couldn't just walk in and pretend to be someone else. David called his college roommate Tony, who worked in theater production. They had stayed close friends over the years, and Tony had helped with costumes and makeup for local productions. When David explained what he wanted to do, Tony was quiet for a long moment. "You're serious about this?" Tony finally asked. "You want to go undercover in your own company?" "I know it sounds crazy," David said, "but I'm getting complaints about discrimination, and every time I try to address it through normal channels, nothing changes. I need to see what's really happening when I'm not around." Tony agreed to help, but he warned David that it would take more than just changing clothes. "If you really want to fool people who have met you before, we're going to have to change everything. The way you walk, the way you talk, even the way you hold yourself. You carry yourself like a CEO, and that's going to give you away immediately." They spent several evenings working together in Tony's garage, which he had converted into a workshop for his theater projects. Tony taught David how to change his posture to look less confident and commanding. David practiced walking with his shoulders slightly rounded instead of standing tall like he usually did. He learned to speak more quietly and hesitantly, like someone who wasn't used to being heard in business meetings. The physical transformation was even more dramatic. Tony used professional makeup to change David's skin tone slightly and add some facial hair. David got a haircut that was completely different from his usual style. He bought clothes at discount stores, choosing outfits that looked professional enough for business meetings, but clearly came from budget retailers. Instead of his expensive leather shoes, he wore scuffed loafers that had seen better days. The hardest part was creating a believable backstory. David decided to become Michael Grant, a small business owner looking to start a consulting firm that helped other small businesses with their operations and marketing. He spent hours researching what this type of business would really cost to start and what kind of office space would be appropriate. He created a business plan that looked realistic but showed the budget constraints that many small business owners faced. David practiced his new identity with Tony's help. He learned to hesitate when asked about his financing, to seem slightly overwhelmed by the commercial real estate process, and to ask the kind of questions that someone new to business would ask. Tony made him practice over and over until the transformation felt natural. "Remember," Tony said during one of their practice sessions, "you're not just changing how you look, you're changing your entire energy." Michael Grant is excited about his new business but nervous about making the right decisions. He's worked hard to save money for this opportunity, and he can't afford to make mistakes. David also had to figure out how to take time away from his regular job without raising suspicions. He told his assistant that he would be spending the following week visiting their other locations to check on operations. This was something he did regularly, so nobody would think it was unusual. He arranged for all his meetings to be rescheduled and made sure his phone would be forwarded to his assistant for anything urgent. The night before he planned to start his undercover investigation, David stood in front of his bathroom mirror practicing his new identity one more time. Looking back at him was a man who looked like he could be David Thompson's cousin, but definitely not the CEO of Thompson Real Estate Group. Michael Grant looked tired, a little stressed about money, and hopeful about his business dreams. David had to admit that Tony had done an amazing job. David barely slept that night. Part of him hoped he wouldn't find anything wrong. Maybe all the complaints were just misunderstandings or isolated incidents. Maybe his agents really were treating everyone fairly, and he was worrying about nothing. But deep down he suspected he was about to discover things about his company that would break his heart. Early Monday morning, David drove to a parking garage 6 blocks away from his downtown office. He had left his luxury car at home and borrowed Tony's 10-year-old sedan that looked like exactly the kind of vehicle a small business owner trying to watch expenses would drive. He sat in the car for a few minutes, getting into character and going over his story one more time. Michael Grant was 38 years old and had worked for other companies his whole career before deciding to start his own consulting business. He had saved up enough money for the first year of expenses, but he needed to be careful about spending. He was looking for office space that would be professional enough for client meetings, but affordable enough that he could make the rent even if business was slow at first. David checked his appearance in the rearview mirror one more time. He was wearing a navy blue suit that looked decent but was obviously not expensive. His shirt was clean and pressed but came from a department store rather than a custom tailor. His briefcase was professional but showed some wear around the edges. Everything about Michael Grant's appearance said, small business owner trying to make a good impression on a tight budget. As David walked toward his own building, he felt nervous in a way he hadn't experienced in years. When he was starting his company 15 years ago, he had been anxious about every client meeting and every business decision. Now he felt that same flutter in his stomach, but for completely different reasons. He was about to find out whether the company he had built was living up to the values he thought he had instilled in it. The Thompson Real Estate Group sign looked different from this perspective. Instead of seeing it as a symbol of his success, David found himself looking at it the way a potential client would. Did it look welcoming? Did it suggest a company that would take his small business seriously? He realized he had never thought about these questions before. David took a deep breath and walked through the front doors of his own company as Michael Grant. The receptionist looked up with a polite smile and David felt his heart racing. This was it. After months of wondering what was really happening in his own business, he was about to find out the truth. "Good morning," David said, speaking more quietly than usual. "I'm here to inquire about commercial office space. I'm starting a consulting business and looking for the right location." The receptionist's smile didn't change, but David thought he saw something shift in her expression. Maybe it was his imagination, or maybe his undercover investigation was about to reveal exactly what he had been afraid to discover. The receptionist at the front desk looked up from her computer screen when David approached. Her name tag read Lisa, and he recognized her as someone who had been with the company for about 3 years. She had always seemed pleasant during company meetings and holiday parties. "I'm interested in looking at commercial office space," David said, trying to sound like someone who wasn't entirely sure how this process worked. "I'm starting a small consulting business." Lisa's smile stayed in place, but David noticed she didn't seem particularly enthusiastic. "Okay, let me see. Who's available?" she said, picking up her phone. She spoke quietly to someone, then put the phone down and turned back to David. "Have a seat over there and someone will be with you shortly." David sat in the waiting area, which he had personally chosen when they designed the office space. The chairs were comfortable and the magazines were current. Everything looked professional and welcoming. But as he waited, he started to notice things he had never seen before. Lisa answered 2 other phone calls while he sat there. Both times, her voice became much more animated and helpful. When a well-dressed white couple walked in asking about commercial properties, she immediately stood up and greeted them warmly. She offered them coffee and personally walked them to a conference room, telling them that Mr. Peterson, their top agent, would be right with them. David had been waiting for 20 minutes when an agent finally came out to meet him. Her name was Jennifer Walsh, and David knew her as one of their experienced agents with solid sales numbers. She approached him with a professional smile, but something about her body language seemed different from what he remembered seeing at company meetings. "Mr. Grant, is it?" Jennifer said, shaking his hand briefly. "I understand you're looking for office space for a consulting business. Why don't we talk about what you have in mind?" They sat down at a small table in the main lobby area, rather than going to one of the private conference rooms. David found this odd since he knew company policy was to take all potential commercial clients to private offices for consultations. He decided not to say anything and see how the meeting developed. "I'm looking for office space in the downtown area," David explained. "Something professional where I can meet with clients, probably around 800 to 1,200 square feet. My budget is flexible, but I want to be smart about expenses since I'm just starting out." Jennifer nodded and made a few notes. "What type of consulting are you planning to do?" she asked. "Business operations and marketing," David replied. "Helping small businesses improve their efficiency and grow their customer base. I have experience in corporate management, and I think there's a real need for this kind of service." "I see," Jennifer said. "Well, let me be honest with you, Mr. Grant. The downtown market is very competitive right now. Most of the really good spaces are going to established businesses or companies that can sign long-term leases. For someone just starting out, it might make more sense to look at some of our other areas." David felt his stomach tighten. This was exactly what the complainants had described. "What other areas did you have in mind?" he asked. Jennifer pulled out a folder with property listings. "We have some nice spaces in the Riverside district. They're more affordable, and there are several other small businesses in the area. It might be a better fit for what you're trying to do." David knew the Riverside district well. It was about 15 minutes from downtown, in an older commercial area that was slowly improving but still had reputation problems. The buildings were decent, but it wasn't where most businesses wanted to be if they could afford better locations. "I'd really like to see what's available downtown first," David said. "Even if it costs a little more, I think it would be worth it for my business." Jennifer's smile became a little strained. "Mr. Grant, I just want to make sure you understand the market. Downtown spaces typically require significant security deposits, and the monthly rents are quite high. Many new business owners find that they're better off starting in a more affordable area and then moving downtown once they're more established." There it was. Jennifer was making assumptions about what Michael Grant could afford based on his appearance and the fact that he was starting a new business. David felt angry, but he kept his voice calm and professional. "I appreciate your concern," he said, "but I've done my research on the costs and I'm prepared for the financial commitment. Could we at least look at a few downtown properties so I can see what's available?" Jennifer hesitated for a moment, then agreed. "All right, let me see what I can do. But I want to show you some of the riverside properties too, just so you can compare." They spent the next 2 hours looking at properties. Jennifer showed him 3 downtown locations, but David could tell she wasn't enthusiastic about any of them. She pointed out problems with each space that David knew weren't really significant issues. The parking was limited, the building was older, the neighborhood was getting too busy. She seemed to be trying to discourage him from wanting any of the downtown properties. When they visited the Riverside district, Jennifer's entire attitude changed. She became animated and positive, pointing out all the benefits of each location. The parking was convenient, the neighboring businesses were friendly, the area was up and coming. She clearly wanted him to choose one of these properties instead of the downtown spaces. What bothered David most was that Jennifer never asked detailed questions about his business plan or his financial situation. She was making recommendations based on assumptions about what kind of client he was, not on what would actually work best for his consulting business. As they drove back to the main office, David decided to test something. "You know, I've been thinking about this decision for months," he said. "I actually looked at some properties with another agency last week, and they showed me a space in the Meridian Tower downtown. Do you have anything similar to that?" Jennifer's reaction was telling. David knew they had 2 excellent units available in the Meridian Tower, both of which would be perfect for a consulting business. They were listed in the system and had been available for several weeks. "The Meridian Tower is pretty exclusive," Jennifer said. "Those spaces typically go to established companies with strong credit histories. I'm not sure it would be the right fit for a new business." David knew she was lying. The Meridian Tower spaces were available to any qualified tenant, and a consulting business would actually be ideal for those units. Jennifer was steering him away from prime locations without even checking whether he qualified for them. When they returned to the office, Jennifer walked him through some paperwork for the Riverside properties. She was clearly hoping he would put down a deposit on one of those spaces. David told her he needed to think about it and would call back in a few days. As he left the building, David felt sick to his stomach. Everything the complainants had told him was true. His own agents were discriminating against clients based on their appearance and assumptions about their financial situations. Jennifer had never even tried to find out whether Michael Grant was actually qualified for the downtown properties. She had simply decided that he belonged in the less desirable locations. That evening, David sat in his home office reviewing what had happened during his first day undercover. He made detailed notes about every interaction, every assumption, and every missed opportunity. Jennifer Walsh, an agent he had trusted and promoted, had treated a potential client with subtle but clear discrimination. But David knew this was just the beginning. He had scheduled appointments with other agents for the rest of the week, and he suspected that Jennifer's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. If he was right, the problems at his downtown branch were much worse than he had imagined. David realized that tomorrow would probably be even more eye-opening than today had been. David returned to his own building Tuesday morning, still disguised as Michael Grant. He had spent the previous evening documenting everything that happened with Jennifer Walsh, but he hoped maybe her behavior was unusual. Maybe the other agents would treat him differently. He was about to find out how wrong he was. This time he had an appointment with Patricia Reynolds, the top-performing agent at the downtown branch. David had personally hired Patricia 3 years ago after she impressed him during her interview. She had excellent sales numbers and always seemed professional during company meetings. If anyone would treat Michael Grant fairly, it should be Patricia. Lisa at the front desk seemed to recognize him from the day before, but she didn't seem any more welcoming. "You're here to see Patricia?" she asked, barely looking up from her computer. "She's running a little late. You can wait over there." David sat in the same waiting area as yesterday. About 10 minutes later, a young white man in an expensive suit walked in and approached the desk. Lisa immediately stood up and greeted him with a big smile. "Mr. Anderson, Patricia is expecting you. Let me walk you right back to her office," Lisa said enthusiastically. She personally escorted the man to Patricia's office, chatting pleasantly about the weather and asking about his business. David had been waiting for 25 minutes when Patricia finally came out to get him. She was impeccably dressed and carried herself with the confidence that had impressed David when he hired her. But as she approached Michael Grant, her demeanor was completely different from what he remembered. "Mr. Grant, I'm Patricia Reynolds," she said, shaking his hand, with a grip that seemed deliberately weak. "I understand you're looking for office space. Let's sit down and talk about what you need." Like Jennifer the day before, Patricia sat with him in the lobby area instead of taking him to a private office. David noticed that Mr. Anderson, who had arrived after him, was still meeting with another agent in one of the premium conference rooms. "I'm looking for office space downtown for my consulting business," David explained again. "I need something professional where I can meet with clients." Patricia listened with a polite but distant expression. She asked a few basic questions about his business, but David could tell she wasn't really interested in the answers. When he mentioned his budget range, she barely wrote anything down. "Mr. Grant, let me ask you something," Patricia said, leaning back in her chair. "Have you ever leased commercial space before?" "No, this would be my first time," David admitted. Patricia nodded as if this confirmed something she had been thinking. The commercial real estate market can be very complicated, especially downtown. There are a lot of requirements and qualifications that many first-time business owners don't realize they need to meet. David felt his anger rising, but he kept his voice calm. "What kind of requirements?" "Well, most downtown landlords want to see at least 2 years of business financial records," Patricia explained. "They want proof of steady income, excellent credit scores, and usually require security deposits that can be 3 to 6 months of rent. Many new businesses find these requirements challenging." David knew this wasn't entirely true. While some premium properties did have strict requirements, many downtown spaces were available to qualified new businesses with good credit and adequate capital. Patricia was making it sound impossible when it wasn't. "I've prepared for those requirements," David said. "I have strong personal credit, savings set aside for deposits, and a solid business plan. Would it be possible to look at some downtown properties?" Patricia's smile became strained. "Mr. Grant, I just want to make sure you're being realistic about this process. Starting a new business is stressful enough without taking on more than you can handle. Maybe we should look at some other areas first, just to give you a sense of what's available in your price range." There it was again. Patricia was making the same assumptions Jennifer had made, deciding that Michael Grant wasn't suitable for downtown properties without even checking his qualifications or financial situation. They spent the morning looking at properties, and Patricia's behavior became increasingly frustrating. At every downtown location, she found reasons why it wouldn't work. The space was too large, too small, too expensive, or had some other problem. She spent most of their time at each location taking phone calls or checking her messages, clearly not giving Michael Grant her full attention. When they visited properties in less desirable areas, Patricia became much more engaged. She pointed out benefits and possibilities, encouraged David to imagine his business in these spaces, and seemed genuinely interested in helping him succeed. The message was clear. She wanted him to choose something outside the prime downtown district. The breaking point came when they returned to the office for lunch. David was sitting in the lobby, waiting for Patricia to get some additional property information, when he overheard a conversation that made his blood boil. Patricia was standing near the reception desk with another agent named Kevin, and they were talking in voices that they thought were quiet enough to be private. David could hear every word. "How's it going with your consulting guy?" Kevin asked. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of Riverside Mall as 15-year-old Maya walked through the main corridor. She had just finished her volunteer work at the local library and decided to stop by the shopping center on her way home. Her mom had given her permission to look for a nice dress for the upcoming honor ceremony at school. Maya had been selected as one of the top students in her grade, and she wanted to find something special for the occasion. Maya pulled her worn backpack higher on her shoulder and checked her phone. She still had an hour before she needed to catch the bus home. The mall wasn't too crowded on this Tuesday afternoon, which was perfect. She could take her time looking around without dealing with weekend crowds. As she walked past the food court, the smell of fresh pizza made her stomach growl. She had skipped lunch to finish her volunteer hours, but she wanted to shop first. Maya had saved up money from babysitting her neighbor's kids over the summer, and her mom had also given her some extra cash as a reward for making honor roll again. The boutique that caught her eye was called Elegant Touch. It had beautiful dresses displayed in the window, and Maya could see other formal wear inside. The store looked a bit fancy, but she had enough money for a nice dress. She took a deep breath and walked through the glass doors. The store was larger inside than it appeared from the outside. Racks of colorful dresses lined the walls, and there were shoes and accessories displayed on shelves throughout the space. Soft music played in the background, and the air smelled like expensive perfume. Maya felt a little out of place in her jeans, sneakers, and hoodie, but she reminded herself that she belonged here just as much as anyone else. She started browsing through the dresses near the front of the store. There were so many beautiful options: long gowns, cocktail dresses, and elegant pieces perfect for formal events. Maya ran her fingers along a pretty blue dress, checking the price tag. It was within her budget, which made her smile. From across the store, she noticed a woman watching her. The woman appeared to be in her 40s with blonde hair pulled back tightly. She wore a crisp white blouse and black pants with a name tag that read, "Store Manager." Maya gave her a polite nod and continued looking at the dresses. Maya moved to another rack, examining an elegant black dress with small silver details. It would be perfect for the honors ceremony. As she held it up to check the size, she realized the woman was now standing much closer, pretending to organize some jewelry nearby, but clearly watching every move Maya made. Feeling a bit uncomfortable, Maya decided to look at a different section. She walked toward the back of the store where there were more casual, formal dresses. But no matter where she went, the manager seemed to follow at a distance, always keeping her in sight. Maya tried to ignore the attention and focused on finding the right dress. She picked up a beautiful burgundy dress and examined it carefully. The fabric felt nice and the style was exactly what she was looking for. She checked the price tag again and smiled. Her mom would love this dress on her. "Excuse me," came a sharp voice from behind her. Maya turned around to see the manager standing directly behind her, arms crossed and wearing an expression that wasn't friendly at all. "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied politely. "Are you planning to buy something today?" the manager asked, her tone cold and suspicious. Maya was taken aback by the question but remained calm. "Yes, I'm looking for a dress for my school's honor ceremony. I really like this one," she said, holding up the burgundy dress. The manager looked at the dress, then back at Maya with doubt in her eyes. "That's a very expensive dress. Are you sure you can afford it?" Maya felt her cheeks get warm with embarrassment, but she kept her voice steady. "Yes, ma'am. I have money." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her debit card to show the manager. The manager barely glanced at the card. "Where did you get that card? Is it really yours?" Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Of course it's mine. My mom gave it to me, and I have my own money in the account from babysitting." "I've been watching you since you came in," the manager said, her voice getting louder. "You've been touching merchandise all over the store. You're making me nervous." Other customers in the store began to turn and look in their direction. Maya felt her heart start to beat faster. She had done nothing wrong, except look at dresses, which is exactly what you're supposed to do in a clothing store. "I'm just shopping for a dress," Maya said quietly, hoping to keep the situation from getting worse. "I haven't done anything wrong." The manager stepped closer, invading Maya's personal space. "We've had problems with theft recently, and I don't like the way you're acting. You keep moving around the store and handling expensive items." Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she fought them back. She knew she had every right to be in this store and to look at whatever she wanted to look at. "Ma'am, I'm just a customer trying to find a dress. I haven't stolen anything, and I'm not planning to steal anything." "That's what they all say," the manager replied with a sneer. "I think you should leave." Maya stood up straighter, finding her courage. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm a paying customer, and I'd like to continue shopping. The manager's face turned red with anger. Don't you dare get an attitude with me, young lady. I know your type. You come in here acting all innocent, but I can see right through you. The words hit Maya like a slap. She knew exactly what the manager meant by your type, and it had nothing to do with her behavior and everything to do with the color of her skin. Maya had heard stories from her parents and older cousins about situations like this, but she had never experienced it herself until now. I don't have an attitude, Maya said, her voice shaking slightly. I just want to shop for a dress. By now, several other customers had stopped what they were doing to watch the confrontation. Maya could feel their eyes on her, and she wondered what they were thinking. Did they believe the manager, or could they see that Maya was being treated unfairly? You need to leave right now, the manager demanded, pointing toward the door. Maya looked around at all the faces staring at her. She felt humiliated and angry, but she also knew her parents had taught her to stay calm in difficult situations. If you want me to leave, I'll leave, but I want you to know that I haven't done anything wrong. I don't believe you, the manager said loudly. In fact, I think I need to check your bag before you go anywhere. Maya clutched her backpack tighter. You can't search my bag. I know my rights. The manager's smile was cold and mean. We'll see about that. Maya held her backpack close to her chest, her heart pounding so loud she was sure everyone in the store could hear it. The manager stood in front of her with that cold smile, clearly enjoying the power she had over a 15-year-old girl. I'm not letting you search my bag, Maya said firmly, though her voice was shaking. You have no right to do that. The manager laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Oh, I have every right, sweetie. This is my store, and I decide what happens here. If you don't have anything to hide, then you shouldn't have a problem letting me look. Maya looked around the store. More customers had gathered to watch what was happening. Some looked uncomfortable, like they knew this wasn't right. Others seemed to believe the manager's story. A few people had their phones out, and Maya wondered if they were recording. Please, Maya said, trying to keep her voice calm. I just want to leave. I won't buy anything. I just want to go home. Not so fast, the manager said, stepping closer. I told you I need to check your bag first. We've had several expensive items stolen this month, and you've been acting suspicious since you walked in here. Maya felt her anger rising, but she remembered what her parents had always told her about staying calm in difficult situations. How have I been acting suspicious? I was just looking at dresses. That's what people do in clothing stores. Don't get smart with me, the manager snapped. I've been working in retail for 20 years, and I can spot a shoplifter from a mile away. The way you keep moving around, touching things, looking over your shoulder, that's classic theft behavior. I was looking over my shoulder because you keep following me around the store, Maya replied. You've been watching me since I walked in, making me feel uncomfortable. The manager's face turned even redder. I watch all my customers. That's my job. But most customers don't get defensive about it. Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never stolen anything in her life. She was an honor student who volunteered at the library and babysat neighborhood kids. Her parents had raised her to be honest and respectful. This whole situation felt like a bad dream. Ma'am, I understand you're trying to protect your store, Maya said, trying one more time to reason with her. But I haven't stolen anything. I don't even have any of your merchandise with me. Look, she opened her arms wide to show she wasn't holding any clothing. That doesn't prove anything, the manager said. You could have hidden something in that backpack or under your clothes. The suggestion that Maya might have hidden merchandise under her clothes made her feel sick to her stomach. She was wearing a hoodie and jeans. There was nowhere to hide a dress or anything else. An older woman who had been shopping nearby stepped forward. Excuse me, she said to the MY. When David returned to Harrison's office, he decided to take a risk. Mr. Miller, I have to ask you something directly. I've been to other real estate companies this week, and they've shown me much better downtown properties in my price range. Is there a reason your company seems to have more limited options? Harrison's face reddened slightly. Mr. Grant, I can assure you that we're showing you everything that's appropriate for your situation. Our agents are experienced professionals who know how to match clients with properties that will work for their businesses. But what if I want to see properties that you don't think are appropriate? David pressed. What if I'm willing to take the risk on something more expensive or challenging? Harrison's patience was clearly wearing thin. Mr. Grant, we've been in this business for a long time. We know what works and what doesn't. If you're not satisfied with the properties we've shown you, perhaps you should consider working with another agency. David felt like Harrison had just told him to leave. The branch manager of his own company was essentially dismissing a potential client because that client was asking to see better properties. That afternoon, David made his decision. He had seen enough. His company was discriminating against clients based on their race and perceived economic status, and it was happening at every level from the receptionist to the branch manager. David left the building and drove straight to his lawyer's office. He spent 2 hours documenting everything he had witnessed and experienced over the 3 days. His lawyer warned him about the legal implications of what he had discovered and advised him to act quickly to address the problems before they resulted in lawsuits or regulatory action. Thursday morning, David Thompson walked into his downtown branch office as himself for the first time in 3 days. He was accompanied by his lawyer, the company's HR director, and a representative from corporate headquarters. The staff's reaction when they saw him was immediate and dramatic. Lisa's face went white when she recognized him. Patricia looked like she was going to be sick. Harrison started stammering excuses before David even said a word. I've spent the last 3 days in this office as a client, David announced to the assembled staff. What I've witnessed has been the most disappointing experience of my professional life. Over the next 4 hours, David conducted individual meetings with each staff member, documenting their discriminatory practices and policy violations. Patricia Reynolds was terminated immediately for systematic discrimination and violation of fair housing laws. Kevin was fired for participating in client profiling and unprofessional behavior. Rebecca received a formal warning and was required to complete extensive retraining. Harrison Miller was terminated for failure to supervise his staff and for personally engaging in discriminatory practices. Lisa was given a final warning and enrolled in mandatory training programs. David brought in a new branch manager with extensive experience in diversity and inclusion. He implemented new policies requiring documentation of all client interactions, regular audits of agent behavior, and anonymous feedback systems for clients. Every remaining staff member was required to complete comprehensive fair housing training. Within 6 months, the downtown branch had completely transformed its culture. Client satisfaction scores improved dramatically, and referrals from minority business owners increased by over 200%. The changes David made didn't just fix the discrimination problem, they actually improved the company's bottom line by serving all clients more effectively. David learned that sometimes the only way to discover the truth about your own organization is to experience it from the outside. His 3 days as Michael Grant changed not just his company, but his entire approach to leadership and accountability.